And we are live.
Thank you very much. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Before we start the meeting, I think it's appropriate that we have a moment of silence just out of reflection and respect for the passing of Queen Elizabeth last Thursday, if you wouldn't mind.
Granted.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council. I'd just also like to take a moment just to remind Council and anybody watching that there is a book of condolences in Town Hall if you wish to come by and sign. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Good afternoon, everyone. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council and town staff in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties. I am now calling this meeting to order, but before I need to do the opening script and land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Thank you. As we begin, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Mayor Collier, I see your hand up. Do you have a
Nope.
pecuniary interest? Okay.
Let me just see. No,
There are no, you're not, sorry?
my hand is not up.
Oh, that was my hand on your screen. Okay, I removed it. Okay, thank you. All right, there are no disclosures. We're now moving on to the adoption of minutes. We have the minutes of the regular meeting of June 13th, 2022. Are there any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, can I get a mover to approve the past minutes? I see Councillor Rob Tyler Morin. All those in favor? None opposed? This motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Tyler Morin. Next, we have the minutes of the closed session of the June 13th, 2022 meeting. Are there any questions on these closed minutes? Seeing none, can I get a mover to approve these minutes? I see Regional Councillor Sterling Lee. All those in favor? None opposed? This motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled for discussion. 4.1, 4.2, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, and 4.10. Are there any other items that members wish to pull for discussion? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda? Councillor Bauer. All those in favor? None opposed? This motion carries. So right away, we're going to move on to item 4.1 on the consent agenda. Mayor Collier, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Just let me go to my notes. And I'm glad to see this come forward a revamp of our Impact Ajax and the fact that we are still going to be putting a similar amount back into the community, despite having our resources from Ajax Downs lowered quite a bit, which is excellent. I just wonder, in the past, and it looks like we've accumulated what we used to allocate directly, the $125,000 to the hospital per year, $500,000 per term, and Impact together. Is there any thought to continuing that annual big ticket allocation to the hospital as we did before, or are this just going to be an application grant process only? To share to, I guess, Ms. Cruciano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair, so the initial intention of the renewed corporate giving program is to sort of retain a large dollar figure tier for each year of the term of council of about $100,000 that we would like to have allocated to sort of big impact community organizations or initiatives. And of course, the hospital would be something that, or an organization that would be welcome to put in an application each year. At this time, staff's intent and the kind of approach that we're taking is that that amount is not going to be specifically set aside for the hospital, but we would welcome the hospital to apply and work with us each year to ensure that we're able to continue to make a contribution to the foundation as regularly as possible.
Okay, thank you. And as we all know, we did have to cut our contribution when the casinos closed and our funding stopped at the start of COVID. But I know that is very important to the community and benefits everybody. So something I hope we can figure out a way to continue. The application process, is there set dates of opening and closing of the application process?
Through the chair, yes, there will be. So this year we are hoping to launch the allocation for, or the opening for the program in 2023 on November 15th, 2022, which is later this year. And then in future years moving forward, we're a little bit squished this year because of the election and some of the approvals. So moving forward, the dates will be set and communicated clearly to the community as soon as those are determined to give folks a little bit more time. But for this year, this year's intake for next year's programs will be launched on November 15th, 2022.
Okay, and how will we be doing that? Will we be reaching out to different community groups directly, or would it just be an Ajax today and on our corporate channels?
Through the chair, we have been collecting email addresses from individuals that have reached out over the past year or two that have sought clarification on our approach to corporate giving. So we will, as soon as that date is confirmed, like once we have the application live, we'll communicate that via email to those community organizations, as well as through a sort of comprehensive marketing strategy through our various accounts and channels. But moving forward, yes, our plan will be to promote this opportunity fairly widely through the town.
Okay, are there any limitations on who can apply? Like, say, just picking off the top of my head, Salvation Army, for instance. Is there any limitations on who can apply, or you can't if you're a registered charitable organization already, or?
Through the chair, no. Our intention is to, we do have some very specific instances where organizations may not be eligible, which, could include things like, I can't really even think of like a political party, for example. We have some, rules around that. But in general, we've tried to keep the eligibility as open as possible from not-for-profits, charitable organizations, groups that are, do good work, but aren't necessarily, incorporated as such, or even in some cases for-profit organizations where it makes sense. So we've tried to keep that eligibility as open as possible.
What about religious organizations? We do have restrictions for things like flag raising with regards to religious organizations.
So through the chair, we at this time the policy that we're developing does not preclude religious organizations in any capacity. And in the past, church groups and organizations affiliated with the mosque or the temples have been able to apply. So, off the top, we don't have a limitation there, but there may be some cases on an ad hoc basis if there's something completely kind of in contravention or in contrast to the town's values that we might look at. But in the most case, we would like to allow everybody to participate.
Okay. And finally, and it would be a good situation to have, I guess, but if there's a surplus at the end of the year, have we given any thought to what that would be done, like put towards the council toy and food drive, for instance, or something like that? Is there any thought as what would happen with any surplus at the end of the year?
So through the chair, in this report, it references that at the end of the year, any amount that's left over would carry over to the next year to ensure that we've set aside $1 million for the 4-year term. And then any excess after that would be allocated through the discretionary discretionary reserves policy that finance has. But there's I think that's where we stand right now. If there's a desire otherwise, I think that's worth the conversation today if council has other ideas on how that should be used.
Okay, my only other suggestion might be, since the policy is still in the works, is that not everything is known now, and there may be some things that come up in the year. So if we allocate 100% in November, December for the entire year, and then something important comes up in September, is there an opportunity to, do you allocate it all at the start, or do you reserve a little bit throughout the year for other important things that might come up?
Through the chair to the mayor, that's absolutely the intention. We know, especially in the infancy of the program, organizations and the way that a lot of these groups operate is that it's really tough to plan a whole year in advance. So we're very mindful of that. And I'm fairly confident that the first intake, we're not going to be fully expensed of the $250,000 after the first intake, but we will absolutely keep that in mind, and we have a process in place for in-year asks and getting those approvals through as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Very thorough answers. Absolutely supported. I'll be happy to move it if you don't have a mover already, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So I just had a couple of questions. Mayor Collier asked the one about the hospital for me. So, Ms. Cruciano, does this corporate giving replace Impact, or is it totally separate?
Through the chair, yes, it replaces the Impact Ajax program, the contribution previously made to the Durham Community Foundation, and the annual contribution to the hospital, as well as a few of the smaller organizational agreements that we have with organizations like Ajax Pickering Road Watch and Para Search and Rescue.
Thank you. The second question, do we have a way of tracking the use of these contributions to the community events, so to speak?
Through the chair, yes. So when contributions are approved and flowed to the organizations that are successful, we will be first of all, we understand what the full use of the funds will be used for, and then at the end of their agreement with the town, they'll report back and tell us exactly what they did and provide us with some data points. On the number of partners and organizations or people that they helped in the community or what some of those outcomes are. And those outcomes, we want to make sure that we're reporting them both to you and to the community, you as council and the community at large, to make sure that, we really understand the impact that these funds are having in our community.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, this corporate giving and impact, et cetera, supporting these local organization and events, is this like a mandate requirement from the municipalities that we have to provide, or is this just an initiative from Ajax Council that's been going on? Do you know?
So through to the chair, we have an obligation through our contract with the OLG to offer the slots as a host municipality, that a portion of the slot revenues are reinvested into the community by some mechanism of granting or community benefit contributions. So this is, that has taken many forms over the years since the agreement was initially signed with the OLG. And this is the latest iteration. So this program keeps us, in line with our contract with the OLG. as well as provides community benefit to Ajax all together.
Amazing. Thank you, Ms. Cristiano. Like the mayor said, you have been absolutely thorough. We have a couple more questions. Regional Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any restrictions on year-over-year like applications that preclude someone from applying every year for the next decade and almost setting an expectation that they're going to get it every year?
Through the chair, there's no limitation on, or at least at this point, we've not set or intend to set any, restrictions on the number of times an organization can apply or if they're able to be successful year over year. However, we do intend that, in all of these cases, organizations will need to apply and be able to show the effects of the funds that they're receiving. So if there's an organization that receives funding from the town and does a really great job year over year for the next 10 or 15 years, we feel strongly that that's not a reason to pull that funds back if those funds are actually having a meaningful, impact in the community. So at this time, there's no restrictions on a year over year application.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Cass. So my question is, I'm so sorry. Along that same line, is there a restriction, or I guess I'm thinking more of the larger ticket items like the hospital and then the regulars for Roadwatch, PARE, et cetera. Is there a limit at that point where it will come? I know you're reporting to council, but will it come where we are actually involved in that decision?
So at this time, based on the direction received by council at the last meeting in June, staff were advised to make the decision at the senior management level and then report it to council. So at this time, all decisions that are made based on the review of applications and internal kind of due diligence that's going to take place, those decisions will be made at the staff level and then just reported to council.
And that is regardless of dollar amount as well?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. And then at what point, would there be a point in time where a decision was made that maybe council doesn't agree with, that there would be a turning point there? Like a reconsideration?
Through the chair, that's at this time, we don't have anything in the policy that would let that happen, with the check being kind of made by senior management and the CAO. However, that's the current state of the policy. But if there's a desire by council to adjust that, then that's something that would need to be voted on by council, I imagine.
Okay. And is there a maximum dollar amount that can be applied for? And I'm sorry if you went over this at the last meeting already and I had forgotten.
Through the chair, that's okay. We have 4 tiers of funding that organizations can apply within, and those tiers are up to $2,500, up to $5,000, up to $10,000, and then up to $100,000.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
You're welcome. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that with the Roadwatch that I would not want the CAO department to make that decision without council knowing. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a partnership that we have with Roadwatch, and if there was ever to be a decision where the money was not coming, I would have a problem with that. That's a thing that's been split between Pickering and Ajax, and so I would hope that they don't fall under the same category.
Through the chair, and that point is very much taken, and staff have already started to have conversations with Roadwatch, that, as well as PARA, that the intent is not to remove funding, and it's more of a grandfathering of these funds through the new process. And that, our intention is to keep those funds the same. But in terms of council's, the reconsideration that Councillor Bauer mentioned, or Councillor Crawford, your thoughts there, if that's something that staff can take away and think about how best that could be applied in the future or worked into the policy in some capacity, I think that might be the best. But I think to assure you right now that, staff's intention for these existing agreements that we have is not to
remove the funding that they received from the municipality and have relied on for the past number of years.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions on 4.1? Seeing none, Mayor Collier, are you still interested in adopting this report?
I will move it, Chair.
Okay, moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor? 4.1? Any opposed? Seeing none, this motion carries. Thank you very much for your participation. We'll now move on to 4.2. I have this pulled first by Councillor Bauer and second by the Mayor. Councillor Bauer, did you just run from me? Oh, there you are.
No, thank you, Chair. Forgive me, I had pulled it and I had my questions. I found the information, I received the info that I asked for, so I'm not pulling it. Thank you.
I did get that email from you after. I'm so sorry. Mayor Collier, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to, this first question might be to Mr. Meredith, but then to Ms. Valentin. I'm just wondering how many, installing dash cams in fleet vehicles, 275,000. I absolutely agree with reinvesting these funds back into our municipality to protect us from claims, hopefully. But I'm wondering, how many vehicles do we have? That's a lot to be allocating for installing dash cams.
It's roughly just under 200 vehicles that we are looking at across the board corporately. So it includes fire and emergency vehicles, our recreation vehicles, operations, and environmental service. It's a corporate acquisition, so it will apply to each of our vehicles.
And that's kind of what I thought. Thank you for that. And I'm just wondering exactly what we're installing, because if I go on Amazon right now, and I know I always tend to simplify things probably incorrectly, but dash cams go for about $139 to the most expensive I saw was $364. And at $364 per piece, we could buy 755 of them. Now I understand there might be some installation, but really, I mean, it's a matter of plugging it into the lighter. How come we're spending $1375 per vehicle on this, and shouldn't those funds be allocated somewhere else? I just don't want to go overboard on this. This is a fairly simple thing.
So what we're going through, and there's been a substantial amount of work that's taken place already during the course of this year. We've done proposal calls, we've done requests for information to identify vendors for both GPS and the AVL dash cam systems. There are a number of...
What's AVL?
It's our GPS system. And what that will do, first of all, there's a strong IT component in terms of the storage and retention of data. So there's a 7-year requirement for us retaining data through the system from a legal standpoint, from a risk management standpoint, and court claims. So there's a whole IT component that is integrated and tied into the actual infrastructure. The infrastructure is all tied into the various reports that we're able to generate from a staff perspective as well. So the terms of reference has been finalized. It is a lengthy document in terms of what the requirements are. It is a best practice. It is a standard approach that municipalities take, and the estimated and projected costs are in line with industry standards for what we're trying to acquire.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, I mean, I have them in all my cars. I bought them, I think about $100, plugged them in, hooked them up, good to go. If there's not an accident or there's not anything to claim, why do I care what happened 7 years ago? I'm just wondering why we're going to have such a much higher expense, and surely there's going to be an annual operating fee attached to this. We don't have them now. This is a new thing. Why it has to be such a court legislated type thing? I mean, if there's an accident in the vehicle, those things will keep the data for probably 7 days. And you pull the card, you put it in, you save it. Then I can understand. But these aren't body-worn cameras for police. These are dash cams in vehicles. And I really think that we could probably do the same thing and satisfy what we're trying to do, protect ourselves from insurance. Can you speak to that? I mean, are we worried about claims that come 2 years out to the fact, or I'm trying to understand the logic?
Well, that in part, that's the case. Claims can come years after the date of an actual event. So the data and information, a lot of which is captured sort of manually through paper records, will be captured through the technology that we are purchasing. When we introduced it as a capital project, sort of we laid out sort of the details and specifications of what we are looking at from a municipal perspective. The costs are, as I mentioned earlier, in line. There's nothing that we're asking for over and above than what industry standards are for a municipality dealing with a fleet of our size, giving us the information and reporting capabilities that we require. So there's nothing, I don't really think we're comparing apples to apples with the type of dash cams that you would
maybe not
wire from wherever. So we've done a lot of research, as I mentioned, submitted it through the capital budget process. And like I said, I believe that what we're after and what we're recommending is what our needs are from a municipal perspective.
Okay. And I always try, and my questions, I always try and be in the position of a resident seeing this and trying to understand, you know, like for me, I just go on Amazon, buy one for $100. And just to justify why we're going to spend $13.75. And that's why I'm asking these questions, to sort of get that out there, because I don't want to be criticized for this decision. I know it's a good idea, and I know it'll probably pay for itself through avoiding claims going forward. So I'm not trying to be, you know, a pain about it, but I do want to make sure that we thoroughly flesh this out. And the 110 or 111,000 from the insurance pool, that's just going to be allocated towards this project because it's already been approved through our capital budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. I'm happy to move this, Chair.
You're welcome. Any more questions on 4.2 insurance renewal? I see no other question. This is moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor? I see all hands. This goes unopposed. The motion carries. We will now move on to 4.4 by Mayor Collier. This is user fees and charges. Mayor Collier, all yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to understand, there are several of the items listed in the user fee. Most of them are MPI, but there's several that are no change. And some of these, like permitting and those type of things, do have labor and staff implications. So I'm wondering, what are the parameters where we would decide no change versus MPI for many of the others? Because our costs have gone up even on the no change items. I guess that's through the clerk, perhaps, Chair.
Sure, thank you. I can take a stab at that one. So the baseline adjustment for every fee is MPI. That's sort of the starting point. And we go on the basis that everything is to be adjusted by MPI in reflection of the increased cost of doing business, unless there's some reason not to do so. And there's a variety of reasons why that might occur. So, I mean, I can just speak to a couple in my area that I'm more familiar with, but if you have specific questions in the other departments, those may need to be fielded by department heads. But just to give you a couple examples, some of the fees we charge are established by legislation. So for example, the fees that people pay to apply for an FOI request or for us to do record searches or things like that. And then we also have, you know, where we deal with such requests, but we don't go through the FOI process, the fees still mirror what we charge through FOI. So they're sort of like legislative or quasi-legislative, so we can't adjust them. Another example might be, just to take one from my area, burial permits. So this is like a permit fee, it's $25. All of our neighboring municipalities charge that or less. And we know that if we adjust that upward, we don't sell very many of them, but if we do, it's pretty easy for the people looking for those licenses to just drive to Pickering or Whitby and get them there instead for a lesser cost. So we do some market analysis and just make determinations about what the appropriate fee is in light of our increased cost of doing business, but also what other municipalities are charging as well.
Okay. Because the FOI ones were ones that I was specifically thinking of. These are things that people come in and request that are a lot of work for staff and have a real cost. but they don't say legislated. It just says no change on those.
Yes, so let me just go to that page.
It's page
26.
26 of the report, of the agenda.
Yeah, so if you look at sort of the bottom half of that table, those are all the fees that are, you can see in the right-hand column, it says statutory fee.
Yes.
Those fees are established by statute, right? So if somebody comes in and says, I want this piece of information, do I have to file an FOI request for it? If we send them through the FOI request process, that's pretty cumbersome. It's, you know, that process is prescribed by legislation. It takes us quite a long time, but we're only allowed to charge the fees that are established in the Act. We cannot charge in excess of those fees. So if we're able to process that request outside of FOI, because maybe it's, you know, routine documents that are subject to public disclosure anyways, it's less cumbersome for us to process that outside of the FOI process. But we can't charge more for that because then people would just opt for the FOI process. So it's a bit of a funky example, but I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you. And finally, just to Ms. Valentin, what are the budget impacts to this? Obviously, there's an increase in revenue. Do you have that quantified or estimated?
I don't at this point. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Could you?
I can actually respond to that, Mr. Mayor. I believe it's in the FI section of the report. It is $312,000.
So almost 0.5% of our annual budget. Is that accurate? Or are we up to, what's 1% looking like these days?
It's about 755,000.
All right, so almost 0.5%. Which in a 7% or 8% inflation world is pretty reasonable, I think. Okay, thank you so much. Those are my questions. Appreciate it, Chair. Thank you, staff.
Any other questions on 4.4? I see none. I need a mover for this report. I see Regional Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? I see all hands, none opposed. This carries. We will now move on to 4.5. Any guess? Mayor Collier, all yours.
Sorry. One thorough.
Your turn.
I just wanted, this is something I'm asking about because when the River Plate Veterans Association was here visiting in June, they specifically asked me this. So I wanted to ask, it was very important to them to be able to have access to our digital archives. And I just want to ask through you to the clerk or to Ms. Basler, if she's on from the library, does the MOU, and I did not read the whole thing, does the MOU speak to digitizing as many of the archives as possible, and will they be available on our open portal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The MOU does not specifically speak to digitizing the archives. However, the library has plans to modernize this service. And one of the drivers is, of course, to make the archive more accessible to the public. And so that includes further digitization of records. In addition to that, we'd also like to revamp the existing digital repository, making it more user-friendly and more discoverable. So absolutely, that is part of our plan to ensure that we are preserving this important record.
Thank you.
Additionally, library staff have a well-established relationship with the Veterans Association, and so we're happy to work with them to determine what their priorities are.
Thank you. And I think there's an opportunity there also for items that the Veterans Plate Association has in their possession to get those digitized and added as well for the benefit of everybody. We're very, very proud of our history. And I think making it as accessible as possible and as prominent as possible is a good thing for all of us. So thank you very much, Ms. Basler. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent job, Ms. Basler. Thank you very much. Any other questions on the library? I see none. Okay, wonderful. I need a mover to adopt the recommendation in this report. I see Councillor Bauer. Thank you very much. All those in favor? I see all hands and Joanne's reluctantly, but yes, that would carry. Thank you very much. Okay. 4.6, Mayor Collier.
Me again? Sorry, folks.
Yes, sir. Surprisingly.
Yeah, shocking.
Thank you for being so thorough. We are all learning a lot from your questions.
This is something I think I actually had put on the council wish list. it's always been difficult for me to understand why we pay some of our committees a stipend or an honorarium and not all. I think if we're going to ask residents to serve on committees, especially council appointed committees, and provide advice to us, I think they should all be treated equally and paid equally and fairly. So given that, I think that we should not have a difference. And looking at the table on, I don't remember the page, but I think that items B and E should be the same. I think classification B, which is a committee created by council to give advice that doesn't appoint its members, and category E, which is exactly the same, but they do appoint their own members, like the Anti-Black Racism Task Force, for example, should be the same. And I would just move if an amendment at the appropriate time that item B be amended to be the same as item E, which is, I think, the $65 per meeting.
That'd be page 102, Mayor Collier.
Page 102. Thank you, Chair. That's why you're the chair.
Okay, and amendment. Do we need amendment written for this? Is it going to happen today?
Right now.
Yeah, okay. So we need an amendment and we need a mover. Well, you're the mover. We'll need a seconder for it.
Don't need a seconder, GDC.
No seconder. Okay, can we have this amendment done?
Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have prepared some wording. We can show it on the screen if that would be helpful to council members.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, just give us one moment.
Thank you. So Mayor Collier, you're asking that both amounts be the same, comparable. Are you matching the $37.50 or the $65?
The 65, there it is, yeah, and the rate of 65 per meeting. So it's just amending B from the, whatever it is, 35 to the 65. So they are all the same. It's a very, very, very small amount to the annual budget. And I think shows the public that we respect their input and appreciate their service to the town. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any questions on this amendment? I see Regional Councillor Lee's hand. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to staff. Why was there like that much of a delta? Was there a specific rationale or just want to hear from staff? I agree with the amendment in principle. Just want to know what the staff realization was, or why it happened that way.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, we did make a distinction between these two types of entities. The ones in category B are sort of the more traditional model of advisory committees. They tend to exist more in perpetuity and they have kind of a more limited role of giving advice. The ones in category E are usually like task specific, maybe have a particular mandate that may not exist in perpetuity forever, but often their projects are more sort of like action oriented, more decision making. But that being said, I take the mayor's point. I have no concerns with this amendment. I can see how they are comparable.
Great. Thank you for that response. Yeah, full-heartedly support the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions on the amendment? I see none. All those in favor of this amendment? I see all hands. This carries. And I'd like a mover to adopt the recommendation, the report with the amendment. Moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor? I see all hands. This goes unopposed. This motion carries. Thank you, Mayor Collier, for all your input. We will now go to 4.10, pulled by Regional Councillor Joanne Dice. Regional Councillor Dice, the floor is yours.
Chair, I think you missed 4.7.
Oh, I don't have 4.7 here in my record. Sorry. Was that pulled by you by any chance, Mayor Collier?
Last one, I promise.
Oh, okay.
I had pulled it. So sorry to talk out of turn through your chair. I had pulled 4.7, but
4.7 for you both. Okay.
Yeah. I thought it was the first one, but
okay, Mayor Collier, is it okay? I'll ask Councillor Tyler Moran to go first.
Happily postponed. He was first, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I apologize for this mishap. Councillor Rob Tyler Moran, 4.7. It's yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor.
You are most welcome.
Through you, Chair, to staff, perhaps Mr. Meredith, could you speak just maybe, I just want you to say on the floor here, if you can, just speak to the procurement process and how exactly that works. Mayor Collier and I had a motion speaking to, trying to use local and that procurement process last year and passed unanimously. And I see this report here and we're using a supplier from way outside of where we are. But I understand there's procedures and protocols. Could you just speak to that a little bit, sir?
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, we, as you know, have a procurement bylaw and policy in terms of how we go about acquiring goods and services, and vehicles are no different than many others, whereby we work with our purchasing department. We develop tenders and specifications based on our vehicle needs and requirements in this case. And the documents, bid documents, typically get posted to a public website where really any dealer has the opportunity to download the specifications and make bid submissions on the, in this case, vehicles that we are looking to procure. And sort of based on that, we will make a recommendation to purchase based on the best value that we receive through that tendering process. So it's a public process. It's available to local dealerships as well as other dealerships in the province of Ontario. And in this case, as you've referenced, the dealer is from out of town. There were no bids, from my knowledge, from any Durham-based dealerships on this tender.
Okay, if I just can do a follow-up, or Chair. So that procedure of kind of putting it out there and saying, okay, we're now accepting bids, we need so many vehicles or whatever it is that you're purchasing, in this case it's vehicles. Is that like a provincially mandated, legislated sort of system, or is there any wiggle room on that for the future? I'm just using in my mind the example that Mayor Collier had about buying on Amazon. And is it fairly tight? Like you have to follow this procedure?
Yeah, again, we're getting into the purchasing realm, and I might have our treasurer or director of finance, Ms. Valentin, speak to it. But from a provincial standpoint, there is legislative requirements that we need to follow. We have local bylaws and policies from a town of Ajax perspective that sort of dictates the process that we follow as well. So it is a somewhat regulated process, but I'll ask Ms. Valentin if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Meredith. Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin. So we do have a procurement bylaw in place. We did assess the local preference section of that, and that is not, it's not part of our bylaw right now. I think we are looking at that for under 5,000, any purchases under 5,000 right now. But as far as giving value to the taxpayer, it's best to go out to a competitive bid, more widespread, to ensure that we get the best value for the taxpayer dollar. Our new purchasing manager is constantly looking at, better ways to do procurement. He's working with the manager of economic development to ensure that our local vendors are aware of the bids that go out. But it is a bid platform that's available, I would say probably across Canada. We use bids and tenders that we post all of our bid documents on.
Okay, that kind of explains it. I guess in a perfect world, we love, especially these, you talk about under 5,000, these big ones are the ones that I would love to see stay here and create jobs and, tax money when they buy it and all the rest of it. Can I ask one more question?
Yep.
If I may. Is there any discussion in the ranks with you, Mr. Meredith, and your team about electric vehicles moving forward? Is that something we could probably see as part of purchasing in the near future-ish?
Well, as you recall, earlier this year, Staff did receive direction from council to do a green fleet strategy, which would include the electrification of vehicles. So staff do have that direction. We've made that commitment for 2023, that's something that we will be embarking upon, and that's something that we're still committed to. So yes, I think this council has provided that direction to staff, and we have and will be planning for it accordingly during the 2023 season.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Tyler Morin. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to pick up where Councillor Tyler Moore left off. I have always been a very strong advocate of local procurement, and I understand our hands are tied by provincial legislation, and I intend to write a letter to them hopefully soon to ask about that and see if that can be opened up a little bit, because again, we all want to support our local businesses. Having this on a corporate bid platform is great, and you've said that the local businesses are advised. I just wonder, is there more of an opportunity here for us to take, through economic development, I guess, a bit of a stronger approach? It really irks me to go somewhere like buying a Chrysler vehicle, I'm sure is the same price here as it is there, because they pay the same price to the factory. Given the volume, I just think that we should have some further outreach locally. We can't give them any preferential treatment, but I think we can certainly give them a nudge. Your thoughts, Ms. Meredith, or perhaps Ms. Fountain?
Well, again, through the chair.
More of a nudge.
Sorry. Through the chair to
nudge. A push.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, I can speak for the last 10 to 15 years that I've been sort of in the operations and environmental services world, and the communication that does take place between our fleet services section and our local dealers is ongoing. They are well aware, and for the most part, they choose not to bid on these tender requests as we set forward. They are aware. We will continue to let them know and make them aware and provide them that opportunity. Obviously, we cannot force them to bid. There are times where we've gone out to the street for these types of vehicles, these types of tender calls, and received no bids. So it's something that doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, from your perspective or from the local residents' perspective. But the margins and the profit margins relating to these types of vehicles, again, are not necessarily what you would think, and they're not always the most attractive from a dealership perspective. They're not priorities, these types of contracts, in many ways. So we will continue. We already do reach out, and there are we've obviously got certain specifications that we require from a municipal perspective to meet the requirements of our department. And again, for whatever reason, there's many that local dealers and others choose not to bid.
Okay, fair enough, and I do understand. I do know what the actual figure is that they make through the fleet, so it's not much over sticker price, that's for sure. But I just always want to get that opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about our purchasing policy. To Ms. Valentin, this is 22% over budget, and through our policy, we have three options: cancel the bid, reduce the scope, or I guess prolong it, put it off. But we've chosen to go ahead even though it's over budget. I brought up before, and I think I'm waiting to hear, to get some sort of report back on alternatives. I mean, we always buy our vehicles, but I'm not understanding exactly why we buy our vehicles and we don't look at leasing our vehicles, since we tend to replace them every 5 years at fairly low mileage. Can you speak to that, please? Why we're not leasing these vehicles instead of going 22% over budget to buy?
If I may, I'm going to pass that over to Director Meredith.
Whoever would like it.
So, yes, I don't mind taking that question. It's something, again, Mayor Collier, about 3 years ago, the town had always taken a hard line on buying versus leasing, right? It had always been an expectation that we would purchase all vehicles. 3 years ago, that did change. We do lease vehicles now. There's a number of vehicles that we do lease, and we do have line items within our operating budget to cover our leasing costs. So doing a fleet utilization study, we established certain criteria whereby we measure the value of purchasing versus leasing vehicles. It relates to the usage of the vehicle. It relates to whether it's seasonal versus year-round based on the number of kilometers that you put on the vehicle. There's a variety of factors and criteria that we use to make that determination. So it is something that we have transitioned towards, and it's something that we do continue to look at on an annual basis as we build our work plan. So I guess in short, we have started to lease vehicles. I'm going to say we've got probably 7 to 10 vehicles in our fleet right now that we do lease. It's something that we will continue to look at. And you're correct, there are advantages to leasing vehicles versus purchasing. And that's something we'll continue to do. And we sort of look at it from a business case perspective in terms of what's in the town's best interest. This past couple of years, it's the leasing side of things has presented a challenge because of the availability of vehicles. So if we start to become too reliant on leased vehicles and they happen for whatever reasons to be unavailable, then that creates some operational challenges from our perspective as well. So there's a balance, and it's something that we'll continue to look at and manage what is the most economical and in the best interest of the town.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear you say that, Mr. Meredith, because to me, I mean, buying a depreciable asset outright is versus something we can spread over time is something that I have trouble with, although I do it myself. So it's a balance, I guess, on how long you depend to use it, what you're going to use it for, all those different variables. I wonder when we look at brands, like we're getting just Chrysler products here, I believe. Would it make a difference if we open it up, or do we open up completely to Ford, GMC, Chrysler, Chevy?
Our specs are open-ended. They're not specific to Chrysler. They're not specific to GM. For these types of vehicles, we do have, and I checked with our acting fleet supervisor earlier today, and I guess our last sort of local being regional in 2020 was our last award, which was to Fraser Ford, right? So that was sort of the last time, with nothing in 21, but in 2020 we did deal with them. So our specs aren't written so that they are specific to one versus the other. We've got mostly Dodge or sort of Chrysler and Ford for the most part in our fleet. We'd like to get more GM interest into the fleet as well, and that's something that we're still pursuing as well.
Okay, and I think finally, and you've already spoken about our green fleet strategy that you've been directed, and I look forward to seeing that report. How many of these vehicles are hybrid, battery electric, or electric vehicles?
These ones are gas, but we will be looking through the green fleet strategy as we know electric vehicles are coming on board sort of really starting next year for hopefully as far as Ford goes. So as it stands right now, these are electric vehicles. Or sorry,
not electric.
Not electric. They're your traditional fuel operated vehicles.
Well, I know this capital, sorry, I fibbed, one more. I know these are already a capital approved budget item that we approved last year. So that's done. The money is already allocated. We're not making that decision today. However, it makes me wonder, since we are waiting on our green fleet strategy, does it make sense, given now that we know it's 22% over budget, to be still buying them today, even though we don't know if they're even available right now? There may be supply chain. It may take, new vehicles these days can take up to a year to get. Would it might make sense to hold on until we get that green fleet strategy and see what comes out next year, since we're so late in the year right now? It's September. And this is the 2022 budget item.
Our recommendation is to proceed as we are recommending today. It's not just operations, it is bylaw services, it is other departments that are depending and reliant upon these vehicles. So I wouldn't want to hold off on these acquisitions today, but I think staff are aligned with council in terms of how we see the procurement moving forward, even as we look at our capital detail sheets for 2023. Although we don't have a green fleet strategy, it's something that we know the direction that we want to head, and we have that in mind as we're preparing our capital plan for next year.
Okay, I don't know about the rest of council. I am definitely looking ahead to, I am not purchasing something today that I know may be obsolete in 4 or 5 years. And I think at the town level, we really need to take that solid, even though it's going to cost a little bit more. We set very, very strong or very, very aggressive climate reduction targets. And I'll be asking a lot more thorough questions next year on this going forward. So I really look forward to seeing that strategy. And thank you very much for the answers to questions.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Any other questions on 4.7 municipal vehicles? Any at all? Not even Councillor Lee, so passionate about electric vehicles, nothing? Okay, wonderful. I need a mover to adopt this recommendation. Mayor Collier, all those in favor? I see all hands. This carries.
Done.
Unopposed. Was that it for you, Mayor Collier?
Sorry, I said done.
Yes, I figured. Yes. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, the main show, Regional Councillor Dies, 4.10. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. I wanted to pull this report on a SNAP project, which, as you know, is a partnership between the Durham Region and between the TRCA, Toronto Region Conservationist Authority, and it's here in Ajax, so a partnership with us as well. And it's really a great, great program. Has been very successful in other areas. But it's a little different than we have experienced previously because it's more of a complicated project. There's more than one project as we think of a project, say, as tree planting. It's more involved in that and will go on for possibly a few years with funding from all of those partners. And I just wondered if Mr. Cameron can give us a better idea and a sense of what we're looking at or what the potential scope of this project might be, because we have chosen an area that is called Neighborhood 1 area. We know that area around Town Hall and also part of Southwood. So I just wondered if you could explain to us exactly, well, you won't know yet, but kind of what's involved in this.
Absolutely. Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dies. You're correct. The Ajax SNAP program will be quite different than typical community engagement that's related to sustainability and climate change, where you may see, the one-off events with school groups or Girl Guides groups to do a litter pickup or a tree planting. The SNAP program involves the community across a neighborhood early on in the process to develop a program that they want to see in their neighborhood and that they want to be involved with. So it's not the town dictating what we want to see in the neighborhood. It's working with those residents and those stakeholder groups to really define it. And a SNAP program is a multi-year program. Within the first year, we do have some pretty detailed deliverables in terms of getting a characterization of what our baseline looks like in the neighborhood, identifying stakeholders, key community leaders, and then working with them through public forums and surveys and other engagement tools to help develop an action plan that they want to see in their neighborhood. So that an action plan will come out of this whole process where there may be more funding required to implement some of those actions. So for example, in other SNAP neighborhoods across the GTA, urban agriculture and community gardens has always been a big priority for the neighborhoods. And those obviously would require some upfront capital costs to implement. So that's just one of the examples of something that we may see in this neighborhood. Others may be more targeted approaches to energy conservation measures, whether it's in a single residence or a multi-residential building. So it's really, we need to get in, characterize the neighborhood and the stakeholders and identify who our key players will be to work with them closely.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, because I know that we also look at our communities and our neighborhoods and their overall health. When we talk about TRCA, we automatically think of environmental health, but the impacts of the environment do drill down to the overall health impacts on our residents. So for that, one of that reason in particular, I'm very happy to see that you've chosen this area and that we have some really great opportunities here to make things better for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Councillor Dies, Regional Councillor Dies. Next, we have Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Richardson. Thank you for this wonderful report. It's so exciting, this program. I remember talking about it briefly with you a while ago. And I'm glad of the neighborhoods chosen, and one of those is my neighborhood. So what is the exact timeline, or do you have a little more detail on when you think those next steps will occur and how you see it fleshing out before the creation of the action plan?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, we're currently working on a letter of agreement with Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, as well as the region of Durham. So really identifying the exact deliverables that need to happen and the timing. So that will have timing related to the whole first year of the program, which will essentially start in this month of this year. So we will have it all laid out with, background characterization will occur first. And we're anticipating that most of the in-person engagement, the public forums and workshops will occur early in the new year and into the spring. So we will be working closely with TRCA and the region of Durham to finalize that letter of agreement and sign it, which identifies all of the detailed deliverables.
Great, thank you. And I'm guessing you'll use IMO to sort of spread the word for public engagement?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, that's correct. We'll have a project website as well as a communications campaign associated with this program, and that is part of the contract award to TRCA, that they'll have their communication staff develop materials, reach out to other groups and host workshops as well.
Great, okay. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's my question.
You're welcome. Any other questions on 4.10? I see none. Regional Councillor Dai, since you pulled it, would you like to move this recommendation to this report? Okay, so this is moved by Regional Councillor Dais. All those in favor? I see all hands except Mayor Collier. Oh, there you go. All right. None opposed then, I presume. Okay, this motion carries. Mr. Richardson, thank you very much for that thorough answers to our members of council. That was very well done. Much appreciated. So that concludes all of our consent agenda items, and now we will move on to, so we have nothing for discussions actually, so we'll move directly on to presentations. I don't think anybody needs a break because it's going to be beginning of the end. Wonderful. Okay, so now we have a presentation of the 2021 financial statements and audit report presented by our Director of Finance, Treasurer, and/or our Manager of Budgets and Accounting. Madam Valentin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to pass the floor over to our auditor, Lillian Chung, who's the associate partner at Deloitte, who has completed our financial statements. She's on the line with us here today and able to speak to the financial statements and then answer any questions that council may have.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Valentin, and thank you through the chair to the committee for having me here today. As mentioned already, the financial statements have been completely audited and they were included within your materials for today. Our audit has been completed and they were successfully completed on the consolidated financial statements included in your package. As a reminder to the committee, we serve not only as the auditors for the town, but for the consolidated entity, which includes the library board, the BIAs, themselves as well. And so we do provide an overall audit opinion on these financial statements. The financial statements are prepared in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, which is consistent with the standards that are followed by all other municipalities within Canada. And that is consistent with last year as well. As a result of our audit, we were able to have a concluding meeting with our treasurer, and these financial statements that you see before you today have been approved by the treasurer and do reflect the outcome of our audit work. We're very pleased to let you know that in the current year, there were no corrected or uncorrected misstatements coming out of our audit, which does reflect a clean audit opinion, as you see today. As part of our audit, we also do perform testing on the design and implementation of key financial reporting controls that affect the town. We're also very pleased to let you know that there were no significant deficiencies identified as part of our overall audit on these internal controls. So again, a clean bill of health. In the current year in the financial statements, you would see that there were no significant changes in accounting standards that would impact the town, but there are some that are upcoming in the next couple of years that we have been working with town management on. So those will be reflected in future years. But other than that, there's nothing else that I do want to present to you, but happy to take any questions that anyone may have on the audit or on the financial statements.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Do we have any questions for the presenters? Going once? Okay, I see none. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chung and Madam Valentin. Can I get a mover for the recommendation in the report? Moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor?
Sir, I just had a question on the report.
You have a question? Okay, on this?
Yeah.
Okay, very well. Please proceed. Yes.
Mayor Collier, are you sure you don't have any questions? That was my question. That was it. Just make sure, giving him one more chance to ask any questions before we call it off. Okay, that's it.
All those in favor? Mayor Collier, are you in favor? Oh, yes, he is in favor. Any opposed? None? Okay, this motion carries. Thank you very much. Very, very thorough and well done.
Thank you.
All right, so we have no items on the closed session agenda, so we will not have a closed session. Do you know what we have now? We need to have a mover to adjourn this meeting today.
Actually, Chair,
Yes.
under discussion, I did have one item.
Okay, it's not on the agenda. We can go back to agenda. That's what Regional Council Lee was trying to get to you, Mayor Collier. He was trying to make sure that you didn't miss that.
Oh, sorry. I think Councillor Tyler Morin has some news that he might like to share.
Ah, that's nice. Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. You know, we're here on business, but a huge personal news. Our oldest daughter had a baby boy today. So yeah, I'm a grandfather for the second time. Carter Drew, he's a good little guy, he's healthy, and I'm going out there right now.
Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, so there you go. My first grandson, we have Presley. So anyways, those listening at home, I know this is not council business, but I wanted to share that.
I think it would be in order to ask you to adjourn this meeting, Councillor Tyler Morin.
Okay, I would love to adjourn this meeting with all due respect. And also my daughter's doing very, very well. Thanks.
All those in favor? I see all hands. This carries. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Excellent job.